On this Saturday night, no end in sight with a new wave of U.S. bombardments on Iran's military sites and a fresh deployment of troops. President Trump deflects questions about when to declare victory.
I have my own idea, but what good does it do?
While Prime Minister Carney talks de-escalation.
We remind all belligerents in this conflict their responsibilities to adhere to international law.
The Middle East conflict's impact on your vacation plans. The rising price of oil means a hike in airfares. And how a four-legged postmaster in a small BC community may help to keep the rural post office open.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Colleen Christie.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Tensions are mounting over the effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz that has been choking off a fifth of the world's oil supply. Today, U.S. President Donald Trump renewed his calls for nations to send warships to keep the strait open. The president specifically named the UK, China, and France, among others. The UK's defense minister reiterated they're exploring a range of options with their allies to ensure the security of shipping in the region. Meanwhile, in Norway today, Prime Minister Mark Carney spoke about de-escalation and the rules of engagement.
We have discussed and will continue to discuss what we can do to support the conditions for a de-escalation first and then a cessation of hostilities. So we remind all belligerents in this conflict their responsibilities to adhere to international law. That means no attacks on civilian infrastructure and certainly civilians.
But today, the U.S. ramped up its offensive against Iran with an airstrike on one of the country's major military and oil hubs. Candice Cole has the latest from Washington.
In the latest escalation in the U.S.-Israel-Iran war, the U.S. carried out a large-scale precision attack on Iran's Karach Island, a critical oil hub 25 kilometers off Iran's coast. On Truth Social, U.S. President Donald Trump called it one of the most powerful bombing raids in history of the Middle East that he says obliterated every military target on the island, choosing not to wipe out the oil infrastructure there for reasons of decency. The strike hit more than 90 Iranian military targets, destroying mine and missile storage bunkers. Iran wasted no time hitting back, striking the American embassy in Baghdad and a major energy hub in the United Arab Emirates. The blockage of the Strait of Hormuz, a major artery responsible for shipping 20% of the world's oil, has caused the price of oil to spike, impacting everything from gas prices to bunker fuel.
This is the fuel used to fuel ships. We've already seen bunker fuel double in cost. What that means is everything that moves on the world's ocean is about to get more expensive.
As vessels remain virtually stranded in the narrow waterway, the result of what experts say appears to be a lack of preparation by the United States.
The U.S. has planned repeatedly for a potential closing of the Strait of Hormuz, but it appears that the U.S. really wasn't as prepared, at least politically and economically, for what was going to happen. The first week when all the ships kind of stopped, that was a purely insurance issue. That had to do with war risk and the potential danger for it. But the point now is the ships have been insured. Everything is ready to move. The problem now is really the physical security of the ships.
The U.S. is already in the process of sending 2,500 U.S. Marines and another warship to the Middle East in response to the growing crisis in a conflict that seems far from winding down.
How long now do you think the war is likely to last?
I can't tell you that. I have my own idea, but what good does it do? It'll be as long as it's necessary. I won't give you time, but we're way ahead of schedule.
When asked if the U.S. and Israel's objectives are the same for ending the war with Iran, President Trump said, quote, "They might be a little different, I guess. They're a different country than we are." He did not say what those differences are. Colleen?
Candice Cole in Washington. Thanks, Candice. As the war enters its third week, the number of people killed and displaced across the Middle East is rising. In Iran, more than 3 million people have been displaced. In Lebanon, more than 800,000. Today, Lebanon's health ministry accused Israel of striking a health center in the country's south, killing at least 12 medics. Lebanon's state news agency says 2 people were killed in a strike on this building in Sidon. Government officials say more than 800 people have been killed since March 2nd. In a post on X, French President Emmanuel Macron offered to facilitate talks between Israel and Lebanon in Paris to help reach a ceasefire. As the Iran war tightens global oil markets, Prime Minister Mark Carney is in Norway pitching Canada as a reliable alternative.
We are a safe, low-risk, low-cost, and increasingly low-carbon exporter. The last thing you need in a tight market is to have more problems, and Canada is part of the solution in that regard.
Before taking in a ski festival, Carney met with Norway's Prime Minister and Norwegian energy company Equinor, which is involved in the proposed Bay du Nord oil project off the coast of Newfoundland. Carney says the $14 billion development is just one of the projects that would contribute to the nearly 24 million barrels Canada has committed to releasing to help stabilize international energy markets over the next decade. The first oil from the project isn't expected to flow until 2031. With the war on Iran sending global oil prices surging, the pressure is mounting on Washington to end the conflict quickly. But as Eric Sorensen reports, how this war ends may matter just as much as when.
When Iran first attacked the Gulf states, it seemed a desperate, indiscriminate response to the U.S. and Israeli onslaught. But the Iranians have persisted, striking energy infrastructure, high-rise buildings, and shipping. By choking off oil in the Strait of Hormuz, Iran has exposed the vulnerability of the Gulf states and the global economy as oil prices spike. Countries like Qatar want Iran punished, but also recognize the damage to their economy from a prolonged war.
This is an attack on our sovereignty, an attack on our people, an attack on our economy, an attack on our infrastructure and vital infrastructure.
Iran cannot win militarily, but its attacks appear calculated to exact an economic cost.
It seems that, like, more than interested in inflicting damage, they're interested in shutting down the production of oil and gas.
The Gulf states want the U.S. to succeed, but quickly.
Every day that goes by, these countries are losing massive amounts of money.
The Gulf states are the weakest link in the chain.
This expert says the U.S. is feeling pressure to end the war. But even if Iran is decimated militarily, it would be a victory for the regime if it remains in power.
If the rest of the international community is willing to appease Iran, then in a way they will be able to not only survive, but keep extracting a kind of ransom from the international community by constantly threatening that flow of energy from the Middle East.
We've won. Let me say, we've won.
The U.S. president sounds like he could declare victory any day now, but also seems to understand the cost of ending the war too soon.
That's why we got to finish it, right? We don't want to go back every 2 years.
In the short term, the global economy may hinge on when the war ends. But long term, the fate of the Iranian people and the entire Gulf region may depend on how it ends. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
A dusty orange haze blanketed the Gaza Strip today as a powerful sandstorm whipped through the southern and central regions. Thousands of displaced Palestinians living in tent camps struggling to secure their makeshift homes in the strong winds. Mattresses, blankets, and basic supplies were sent flying, then buried in sand, making an already grim situation worse. Speaking in Arabic, this Palestinian man describes the storm as unbearable, saying, "Every time the wind comes, we suffer. Our life has become misery." People living in encampments have been left vulnerable to the elements due to damage from the war in Gaza and recent strikes from Israel despite an ongoing ceasefire. A pro-Palestinian rally in Toronto went ahead today as planned, despite Ontario Premier Doug Ford's last-minute attempt to block it. Ford said yesterday he told his Attorney General to seek an injunction against the demonstration, calling it a breeding ground for hate and anti-Semitism.
If we don't act now, if we don't act decisively, the hatred won't stop. Our government has a responsibility to do everything we can to protect our communities and put an end to the hate that we see in our province and country.
Organizers condemned those allegations, accusing the province of attempting to silence Palestinian solidarity and criticism of Israel. In a court hearing today, a judge dismissed the injunction request. On social media, Premier Ford expressed his disappointment. Global's Sean O'Shea is in Toronto with more. Sean.
Colleen, this is a demonstration that Ontario Premier Doug Ford did not want to go ahead. He sent his Attorney General to court seeking an injunction to prevent it, but it in fact did proceed. Now, on one side, you had supporters of Palestinian rights, and on the other side, demonstrators with American flags, pro-Israeli flags. It's a real mix of viewpoints here with the war in Iran, even more polarized points of view. And we're just outside the U.S. consulate where shots were fired early this week, and there was intense security there. There were police on the roof of the consulate, Toronto Police mounted unit outside, the public order unit right in front behind barricades. The organizer of the main event talked to us about that unsuccessful injunction application.
We're happy about the decision. We knew it was going to happen. We knew that the case that Mr. Ford brought was without merit. It so happens that democratic rights are important.
We are here with one simple message. We are united against terrorism, and if the politician doesn't do their job, we the people has a civic duty to do so.
Toronto Police promised to put a lot of resources into securing this event, which is what they did. They even declared a no-fly zone so people couldn't fly drones over here. But what the government could not do is prevent this event from going ahead. Colleen.
Sean O'Shea in Toronto. Thanks, Sean. Harm reduction advocates in Ontario are raising concerns about the future of supervised consumption sites in the province. Advocacy groups say they were told late Friday that the Ford government is planning to pull their funding. The move would force the closure of Ontario's remaining sites, including the last two provincially funded locations in Toronto, as well as sites in Ottawa. In a statement, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association says it strongly condemns the decision to defund supervised consumption sites, adding communities across Ontario and throughout Canada are facing an unprecedented toxic drug crisis. The impact of the Middle East conflict on travel. Coming up, why that vacation flight is going to cost you a lot more this summer. Ukrainian officials say Russia bombarded several regions of the country with missiles and drones, killing at least 4 people. Firefighters working to put out this blaze at a building in the Kyiv region. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says the main target of the strikes was energy infrastructure, but residential buildings and businesses were also hit. He said Saturday's attacks included more than 400 drones and 68 missiles, most of which were downed by air defenses. With spring break underway for many and the summer travel season just around the corner, a warning for air travelers. Flights are going to cost more. The surging price of oil due to the war on Iran means jet fuel has become more expensive. Some airlines have already increased fares, and as Heather Yurex-West explains, others are warning price hikes are on the way.
Dirty diaper, yuck. Let's see.
Travel writer Tamara Elliott is looking forward to booking her first trip as a family of 4. But from what she's seen already online, it's likely to be a pricey flight.
At this point, we've already seen airlines in New Zealand, Australia, Hong Kong, Scandinavia implement the fuel surcharge. And the reality is, once they've implemented it, they're probably not pulling it off quite as quickly. Currently high for London.
The war in the Middle East has seen jet fuel prices jump by almost 65%. During its first quarter's earnings call Wednesday, the CFO of Air Transat said in response, "We have increased fuel surcharges on Europe. However, this is blended in the total price." Air Canada says it has already adjusted prices too, while WestJet and Sunwing say price adjustments are coming.
This is not good. The industry has to have these types of increases in order for it to become revenue neutral or profit neutral. Every flight that you're operating today is losing money.
Aviation expert John Gradick says consumers can expect to pay an extra $100 to $200 on flights to Europe, $200 to $300 for flights to India. And buying tickets now may not protect consumers from the added costs.
But if the carriers announce it and it's going to be at a certain effective date, anybody flying on that date and beyond who hasn't paid that fuel surcharge on their ticket will be asked to pay.
But airlines also know if prices rise too sharply, consumer demand could start to fall. Do you think you still fly?
No, because last year I traveled to Cancun and the prices of the flights were much cheaper.
Of course I'd still fly. You gotta go to other places in the world, see what's around.
You gotta go places, right?
And experts warn airfares could climb even higher if this war drags on, especially for flights in high demand times like this upcoming spring and summer travel season. Colleen?
Heather UX West in Calgary. Thanks, Heather. Ahead inside the manosphere, what new polling finds about young men's views of gender equality. More Paralympic glory for Team Canada at the Milano Cortina Winter Games. For the first time since 2014, Canadians have won the gold medal for wheelchair curling, defeating the defending champions, China. It also continues the team's medal streak for the event dating back to when it first debuted in 2006. On the slopes, alpine skier Michaela Gosselin won her first Paralympic medal, taking bronze in standing slalom. An international comparison of gender equality has found that Canadians have less traditional views than our peers from other countries. Canadians are less likely to place importance on men being tough or women being attractive. But despite persistent gaps in pay equity, leadership roles, and other areas, a rising number of Canadians, particularly young men, think we've gone far enough in achieving gender equality. Touria Isri digs into the trend.
I was entering the manosphere, a wild frontier of streamers whose behavior is reshaping the culture.
Inside the Manosphere, the name of a new documentary highlighting online communities that can promote toxic definitions of what it means to be a man.
We have a new generation of boys and young men growing up with these kinds of sexist, misogynistic, outdated norms, and you see that reflected in this new data.
Ipsos polling took part in a worldwide survey coinciding with International Women's Day. It found 57% of Canadian men under 35 say gender equality has gone far enough. That's higher than the national average of 40%. More than half of young men say the push for equality discriminates against men. And 1 in 4 say men should have the final say at home, twice the national average.
Young men and young women are looking at gender equality through very different lenses, which is quite large for a generation that is growing up together.
Younger men are experiencing a well-documented rise in loneliness and falling behind women in many metrics of success.
A lot of these young men are not getting the supports and the connections, the social connections and the answers to their questions in real life.
Psychiatrists say there are concrete solutions, which include pulling men out of the manosphere.
I'm doing it for money. I don't care about the morality of it.
And into the real world to connect with positive male role models.
Men and young men in particular, they crave respect and they crave to be respected, and especially from other males. And we need to find healthy, pro-social ways that will enable them to find that respect, such as being in the military reserve, being a volunteer, being a community leader.
This month, the federal government launched a new strategy on men and boys' health. Officials stress it does not take away from the work they're doing to support women and girls, echoing many mental health experts who say it's not a zero-sum game. Society benefits when everyone thrives. Touria Isri, Global News, Montreal.
The new postmaster in a small BC community who's proving perfect for the job. Next. Small-town post offices have been under threat in Canada, but a Fraser Valley community in BC hopes its new postmaster will help keep the doors open. He's not your typical postie, and as Taya Fast reports, that's the whole point.
Sid may not be sorting letters, but around the Wanik post office, he's already taken charge. The 10-year-old Orange Cat is a familiar face around here, normally lounging between the feed store and mailboxes.
So a lot of people know Sid. They just didn't, they're now aware that he's postmaster.
When talk of rural post office closure started circulating, one resident had an idea to give the local branch a little more personality.
Sid's always been a fixture down here at the feed store and the post office, and there was rumors back when Canada Post was thinking of cutting back on things, we might lose rural post offices. So we want to make sure that people were aware of the post office and used it more.
Sid has now been dubbed honorary postmaster of the Wannock Post Office, and now the cat has his own postmaster hat and his picture on free postcards and stickers for visitors to mail out. A lighthearted idea inspired by another famous cat overseas that helped save a struggling train station.
Tama, the station master in Japan, and what had happened is because that station had low ridership, they were going to close it. But when they found out there was a cat that was station master, so many people came to see the cat that it saved the station.
While Sid won't be stamping envelopes or sorting packages, his new role is already drawing attention to one of the region's oldest post offices. And in a small community where many local businesses have disappeared, the little post office is still a place where people gather.
This is our city center now, and it's a really homey community.
And while Sid's duties mostly involve napping, greeting visitors, and posing for photos, so far the honorary postmaster seems to be delivering exactly what the community ordered. TFS Global News.
Love his little hat. That's Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Colleen Christie. Tonight's Your Canada is Beachfront Park in Pickering, Ontario. We love seeing Your Canada. Please keep emailing your photos to globalnational@globalnews.ca. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Have a good night.